Okay, so this is the podcast for the Game On event. Game On is basically a coding event based on the Scratch programming language. So the goal of the event is to create a video game based on a topic given to you by the event supervisors. You can work in pairs for this event, or you can do it by yourself. And you're judged on based on how creative your game is, how it executes, and if you follow the rubric or not. So just some general rules for this event. You can't use the internet, of course. You'll be using a computer that has Scratch on it, but you won't be using any other internet. You may bring a headset and a microphone to the event to help you, like, if you want to use any sound. But the event supervisors will provide you with the computer, some scrap paper to help you plan your game out, and they'll also provide you with a theme, which they'll give it to you. It's going to be quite a broad theme, and then you'll have to figure out like a more specific game to make out of it. And these are just some example themes like fire, water, gravity. They're all very like broad themes, and then your video game is going to have to be a little bit more specific. And these six themes are really good ones to start practicing with. So if you haven't started practicing, you can choose one of these and start building a game. So how the scoring works for this is basically the overall flow of your game should look something like this. You need to have an introduction page, and then you need to have an instruction page which will teach the person how to play the game. Then you'll have the actual game, and then you should have a game over screen. So basically you should have about like at least 4 screens, if not more. Here is the rubric, which is also online. You can find the rubric. I'll just go over in detail what the rubric is so you have a better idea of it. So the first thing, you need an introduction, like I said. And in the introduction page, you need the title of the game. So you need to come up with a name for your game. And you also need to have buttons and keys to access other screens, which basically means what I usually do is just have a start button, and that start button, once you click it, will take you to the next page, which is the instructions page. And you need 3 things in the instructions page. You need the game objective, so what's the point of the game. You need to explain the movements, and you need to explain how you'll be scored. Part C says user-controlled sprite. So basically in your game you should have both sprites. Sprites are basically like little characters, pieces of the game. You should have sprites that are user controlled, so the person playing the game can control it either by using the mouse or the keyboard or something like that. And you also need autonomous sprites, which basically are moving on their own. And I'll give you an example of a game that uses both of these soon. So for the user-controlled sprites, you need to have some sort of complexity to the movement. That basically just means you can use let them control it using the mouse, let them control it using the keyboard, stuff like that. The speed should be appropriate, shouldn't be too fast, shouldn't be too slow, and the orientation of the sprite basically means it shouldn't be facing up. The sprite shouldn't be facing upside down when it shouldn't be facing upside down. It should have the correct orientation, and that's basically the same thing for part D. Part E says collision management, and collision management means basically when you should have some sort of aspect to your game, like when one sprite touches another sprite, something should happen. So the sprites should be able to interact with each other. They could even interact with the environment around you, and then around in the game, and there should be appropriate interactions for the theme. So the interactions in the game between the different sprites should reflect in some sort of way the theme. And then I'm gonna skip up here to part J, which says implementation of the theme. So this is 10 points. So as you can see, these parts, the gameplay portion of it has a lot more weight. So this has 10 points, and it's basically saying, does your game follow the theme? Do you have appropriate like principles applied to it? Like basically, does it relate to the theme? And also, does it have some level of scientific thought towards it? It doesn't need to be too complex scientific thought, but you need to have some sort of scientific thought attached to it. And then you need graphics. So graphics are just things that you've like made, painted, and also things that you've like. There's a lot of characters on Sprite that are pre-made for you. That counts as graphics as well. And basically here, this is 12 points, and this is just saying like, are your user-controlled sprites, are your autonomous sprites, do they like look good? I guess like, are they like well graphically made? That's basically what it's saying. And do they have some sort of like complexity to it? Like, is it not just like, it shouldn't be just like one dot or something. They should have some kind of complex graphic attached to it. Sounds, you need to use sounds in your game, and that's why it's a good idea to bring a headset and a microphone to it, because there's 8 points given to sound, and it's pretty easy to implement sound. All you have to do is put in a few blocks of code and you'll have sound, and you should have an appropriate volume, and there should be some sort of complexity to the sound. You can either use sounds like, for example, when you pass a level, or like when someone wins, then you can play a sound, or you can just play a sound in the background of the game. It's up to you. Part M says play balance. So your game should have some level of difficulty to it, and you could have different levels of difficulty. That would be good too. And you should also have appropriate speeds. It gets continued over here. It says movements in the game are appropriate. So again, basically you just need to have some sort of balance to the game. It shouldn't be too easy. It shouldn't be too hard. And then 8 points given to just the overall impression of the game and the originality of the game. This is kind of like subjective to whoever's grading your game, so it kind of is up to them. What is their overall impression of the game? If they really like it, they'll probably give you an 8. Yeah. And the gameplay subtotal is 50 points, and then the game mechanic subtotal is another 50 points, and together the total score is 100. There's still a few more parts here. Scorekeeping, basically you need a way of keeping score on your game, whether that just be like a point system, live system, anything. And you need to make sure that the scoring appears on the screen. Yeah. And then debriefing. So after the game is over, like after someone loses a game, basically you need to have a clear, like you need to make it clear that the game is over, and you need to give a like an option on how to restart the game. So you could have a button that says click me to restart, or you could just say like click the green flag to restart or something like that. And this says items remaining on the screen are appropriate. So that basically means if there were any like characters in the game, and then like once the game is over, all those characters should be gone because the game is over, and you should just have one blank screen that says game over with nothing else on it. And then 4 points are given to documentation. Documentation basically means you need to add some comments to the code, and I'll show you how to add comments to the code. Basically, you should just be the main sections of your code. You should document that. And then the next thing is code organization, and that basically says all the elements of your game should be named and titled. All the elements should be logically grouped and organized, and the coding has an appropriate flow. So that basically means your code should look organized. It shouldn't be a mess. Okay, so going into content now. working in partners. So as I said, this event is both, you can do it by yourself or you can do it in partners, but most likely you're going to be in partners. So when you're working in partners, doesn't really pertain to the screening because you're probably not going to be, you're gonna be like alone when you're doing the screening. But afterwards, you're going to have partners in the real event, and when you're working with partners, you should have one person who's doing the coding and then one person who's basically planning out the game, helping with like just the specific details they could be using on the paper, like writing down notes and stuff. And they should also be kind of catching any mistakes that the coder's making, because it's really easy when you're under stress to make mistakes in the coding. So if there's another person, another pair of eyes, then it's much easier. Okay, so this is basically what Scratch looks like. If you have never seen it before, I'll go here. Okay, so this is the Scratch website. Over here they have like featured projects, featured studios. So if you're just getting started with Scratch, these are good things to look at just to kind of see like what you can do, what different things you can do with Scratch. But then over here, if you click Create, okay, yeah, you should be taken to this screen, and this is basically where you'll be working. So just to go over the basics of Scratch, these are sprites. So sprites are like the little character guys. Here, you can make new sprites just by, over here, you can either paint a new sprite or choose one from the library. So these are the sprites that they already like come with. So you can choose one of these. So for example, if we choose this one. Okay, so now we have two sprites. And costumes are basically, so over here you have three. So for each sprite, you have three different subsections. So for example, for this cat sprite, we have the scripts, we have the costumes, and we have the sounds. So scripts are basically the code. Costumes are the look of the sprite. So for here we have two costumes. So one costume that's like where his feet are on the ground, and then one costume where his feet are above the ground. So those are basically the looks. And you can also like edit these costumes. Like for example, you could add like a box around it. And so now our cat has a box. Or you can draw on it like that if you wanted to. Okay. And then there's sounds, and this is the sounds that are, this is on the rubric, you need to add one of these sounds. So for example, this would be the meow sound. Okay, sorry. Um, so yeah, these would be the sounds that you could use. And then here's the script. So for example, if we're gonna go use a script, so we could say move 10 steps. So if you click it, then the cat moves 10 steps. And then you can say turn 15 degrees this way. So then keep turning that way. And then you could also say point in direction. So that would make it point in a certain direction. You could change that direction. So these are just some basic controls. So there's a lot of different categories in the script. So motion is basically making the sprite move. Looks, this has to do with costumes, changing how big or small this is, stuff like that. Sound is basically the sound that we just went through, and we'll go through that more. Pen is like you can do make the cat trace its path. So for example, you could say set pen color to this color, and then you can say pen down, and then if you move 10 steps, if you do pen down and then move 10 steps, so now the cat will basically draw its line. That's what pen does. And then you can clear just by clicking this. Clear, and that will clear it. Also, another thing, so for sounds, how you would implement that is, for example, let's say we had something that said forever. We could have forever move 10 steps. And then what this will do, if on edge bounce, so basically if it touches the edge, the cat will bounce. Also, this, since we put the pen down, and if you don't want the pen anymore, you always need to say pen up so that it will stop tracing its path. So now it doesn't trace its path anymore. And what we can do is we can do something like, if this cat is touching the butterfly, then you can play a sound. So if touching butterfly, then play sound meow. So it kind of sounds a little weird, but that's basically the idea of it. So as you can see, Scratch is very self-explanatory, I guess. It's not very complicated as long as you have like a very basic programming experience. It won't be that hard at all to do. So yeah, there's looks, pen, data so these would be variables, and this is how you would keep your score. So for example, you could have a variable named score, and you could say, okay, so this is now you have a score variable, and then you can say, like, for example, if touching butterfly, then set score, or not set score, but change score by 1. This is just hypothetical situation. So it's being a little weird because it's increasing the score by a lot of numbers because it's touching the butterfly a lot, but that's just that you get the idea. So you can use the score variable also or not the score variable, but you can basically make any variable and use it in your game, and score would be a nice way to use it. Events are basically this, like, it'll wait for something to happen, and then once that happens, it'll do whatever code is underneath it. So for example, when the flag is clicked, it'll start doing all this. Or you could do when space key clicked, or when any of these click. Like for when right arrow clicked, you could say turn something degrees. So now we can, every time I'm clicking the right arrow, it's like moving. So that's cool. And then control are basically the loops, so you can repeat something a number of times forever. If then basically checks for a condition and does something if it's true, and if it doesn't, then it'll do something else. Sensing, sensing is basically how one sprite will interact with another sprite. So for example, you could say the touching. If touching another sprite, you could also say if touching a certain color, do something. If one color is touching another color, if the distance between two numbers or something, or if the difference between two sprites is some number, things like that. And you also have operators. These will help you, for example, if you need to add two numbers, if you want to pick a random number, this helps a lot. And you can also make a block if you want. Basically, if you have like a big block of code that you want to use in multiple parts of the program, then you can like make the block so that you're not having to waste time rewriting the code. But it's not like, I've never used it before. If you want to, then it might be helpful, but it's not necessary to use that. How you use the costumes, how you change costumes. So I can do it for this butterfly here. So what you would do, for example, if you wanted to make it look like the butterfly's flying, you already have two costumes here, which is this costume and this costume, like the wings down, wing up. So what you would do is you would say, when flag clicked, you can put a forever block, and then you can say next costume. So now it looks like, whoa. Yeah, but basically now it looks like the butterfly is flapping its wings. And if you don't want it to go so fast, like the wings are moving really fast for this one, what you could even do is you can say, you could go to control, and you can say wait a number of seconds between each like loop. So for example, this would be 0.5. So now let's make it even smaller, like 0.25. So now at least you can see the wings flapping. So that's cool. Okay. So yeah, that's pretty much it on the basics of Scratch. How to prepare for this event, I've made a list of practice topics that you can use. If this loads, basically it's just a list of possible topics they may be able to give you, and I'll keep adding on to it as I think of more. But you should just choose one of these topics randomly and then time yourself for 50 minutes and try to make a game out of it. And then you should use the rubric and check your game and see if does it actually follow all of the requirements that are on the rubric. And you can also send your game to me. You can give me the link, and I can also check it and give you feedback on how to improve the game. So that's also an option. Let's see if this loads. Oh yeah, so these are just some of the things that I've come up with, but I'll keep adding more. So I'm just going to show you quickly one of the practice ones that I've done, and it was for this topic, which is cars. This is a pretty simple topic, so I'll show it to you. Okay, so this is what my game looked like. So it has a title page. So this is the home page, or like the introduction page. So it has the title page and it has a way to get to the next screen. So for example, I say press. So when I press space, it'll go to the next page, and this is the instruction page. So as I said, it needs three things: the objective, the movement, and the scoring. So it tells you all of that, and then again it has a button thing which will make you go to the next page. And this next page is the game. So I have, as you can see, I have autonomous sprites, which are these little cars that are moving by itself. And then you have this little guy, which is I'm controlling it with the keyboard. And basically the goal of this game is to just get to the other side without crossing the cars, and it's like Crossy Road. So I probably would have not gotten a good score on originality, but it's fine for now, just for the sake of example. So here I can move, and then I don't know if you've heard that, but here, I'll try again. But it makes sound when you when you touch the other side. And then if you touch a car, it makes another sound, and then the game is over, and then it tells you how to go to the next, how to start over. And also there's a score to it, so every time you cross the other side and touch the other side, then you get a point. And also, I forgot to show how to document. So this is how you would document it. So for example, what you would do is all you have to do is right click on the piece of code that you want, and you have to say add comment, and then you can just type whatever you want. And a good example of like a good piece of code, so you could say like a good piece of documentation, you could say this is the code block to make the car constantly move up and down the street. Essentially, the car just continues to change its Y position until it reaches the end, then it goes back up. So this is a pretty nice and detailed documentation. I would say just let's do a little like vague documentation, and then if you have time at the end, then just kind of spice it up and add more. But you don't need to add documentation to all of them. Like for example, you don't need documentation for these little pieces of code, like when this and when that. You just need it for the main pieces. Like here I have a lot of code for the guy, Pico, who's walking, so then I would add documentation so that I can just explain to the person how to use it. And yeah, that is it. If you have any questions, okay, so we have a question that said, can you go through the screening process? So we have to code. Yeah, so the question was, what's the screening process like? So the screening process for this, I'm just going to be giving you a topic, like kind of like these topics, but it's going to be different. And then you will have 50 minutes to make a game. And also, you should bring your laptop to screening. If you don't have access to a laptop that you can bring, that's fine. Just tell me in advance, and then I'll get that ready. But yeah, basically I'll just be giving you a topic, and you'll have to build a game, and then you'll send it to me, and I'll grade you just like how they would grade you, based on the rubric, how you follow the game, how original the game is, how creative it is, stuff like that. And yeah, that is it. Thank you. Oh, sorry, there was one more question. How would we submit the game? You can either, I think last year what we did is just send me a link, email it to me, or you can also bring a USB and you can put it on there and give it to me. But I think the most easiest thing is to just make the game public, send me a link, email it to me, and I'll grade it using that. And yeah, that's it. If you have any other questions, you can email me.